A warm welcome to another in the series of webinars provided by Clarion Defence and Security in the series of In Conversation With. My name is Gary Waterfall and I'm Clarion's Senior Defence Advisor. This afternoon, the theme we're going to be looking at is to explore how British defence exports can be boosted and to what extent the Department for International Trade, Defence and Security Exports plans to support SMEs doing business in this international market. Now, of course, to unpack this afternoon, no better person than Mark Goldsack. Mark, following a long and distinguished career in the British Army as a commissioned into the Rifles, working as the DA out in India, but more importantly, perhaps as the Director for Army Equipment Capability and working across urgent operational requirements for counter IEDs through the era of Afghanistan and Iraq. And on leaving the service, he then moved on and subsequently became the Director of Department of International Trade, Defence and Security Organisation. So Mark, a really warm welcome to you this afternoon.
Thank you very much. Really good of you to have me and always good to be here. And particularly with a year to go till DSEI, just in time to get us all revved up for it.
Yeah, exactly right. So the clock is running under a year now to go to DSEI, next September in the Excel Centre in London. All very much looking forward to it. We've got a number of questions, if we can, to get through over about the next 30 minutes. Before we do, perhaps if I can just ask you to provide your initial thoughts and reflections on where we sit as a landscape, particularly with as Brexit coming up for us in terms of the exit of EU, but also the pandemic, the opportunity that's offered, as well as some of the threat. And of course, with the integrated review due for publication at some stage.
Well, thank you, Gary. And as you say, we're looking at, as always, actually, whichever year you choose to make the statement in, a turbulent global environment. And from our perspective, and from my perspective in particular, when I look out across what we're responsible for, which is making sure that we maximise the amount of export success we have across the defence and security sectors. I'm conscious that we're trying to do two or three major things whilst there's a significant element of global disruption taking place. COVID, of course, has impacted everywhere. It impacts everyone and impacts all of the economies globally. We're aware of that. We're working very closely with colleagues across government, across industry, and most importantly, probably, with the colleagues and friends that we have in our partner governments around the world, in making sure that we understand what that impact's going to be and work out the best way through it for all our mutual benefit. Because the most important thing as we come through this piece is that we all end up in a situation where we feel we've done the best we can across the piece for each other as much as for ourselves. So that really sets the backdrop to it. But of course, COVID in and of itself is but one of a number of factors that are out there. Those that are keen monitors of the international situation will be aware of the degree of turbulence across much of the landscape, particularly in the Middle East. They'll be aware of the turbulence and security issues that hit many of the regions where our partners live and work, and where we need to understand how to do and operate effectively. So that turbulence sits there. It changes its nature year to year. The exact focus changes year to year, but it is a constant theme that we have to understand and have to work with and through. I think the other point I would make is that inevitably at this stage in the government, we're sitting waiting for the autumn settlements, and that always causes a degree of excitement as we reach the dates at which the figures get announced and departments are allowed to understand and plan against what their allocations are. And that particularly affects defence and security, no different to any other department in that sense. And so we are anticipating that. It would be nice to have had the IR occur at the same time. Inevitably, the government, because of the pressure of events, particularly around COVID, it's been announced there's going to be a slight slippage in that, but I don't think that necessarily changes the thrust of what we're going to do, albeit it will delay slightly the timing of the policy-related decisions that sit with it. But most importantly, we've got permission to continue to plan. So I think from where we sit, we're looking at a disrupted global economy. We're looking at an unstable set of operational situations around the world, but we're also looking at an increasingly close and valuable set of strategic relationships with our key partners. And it's against that backdrop that I think what we do is best portrayed. And we will work through that noise to deliver the most effective support we can to both industry and colleagues across government as we work the interface between what at one end of the spectrum is very clear and defined defence and security cooperation, and at the other end is a very clear export proposition. So a broad range of activity in a challenging environment, but we're used to challenging environments. They're things that sit there year on year, and therefore the important thing for all of us is to stay focused on what we're trying to do, which is to build and maintain those intimate strategic relationships with our closest partners, off the back of which our prosperity is founded.
Oh, that's great. Now, your organisation have always played an integral part in the delivery of DSEI as that sort of front of house and that trade show that, that's got a great renowned history and obviously going again in 2021. Now, you're no stranger to the exhibition. How do you see yourself and your organisation building on the success you've had in the past, looking forward to the future? What extra additives do you imagine by next September?
That's a great question. I think as we look out over the year, then there's a couple of dynamics that are in play that we're going to, I think, allow us to focus much more clearly, I think, on what it is that we want from the show as we look at next year's proposition. We've been riding, if you like, a rising tide, if you like, in terms of the success of DSEI year on year. It is acknowledged as one of the key events in the global calendar, and certainly from our point of view, it's the centrepiece of the UK's operation. And for us, the ability to interface, work with a whole variety of our friends and colleagues from our partner countries is fundamental to that. So that, in one sense, doesn't change. What will change, I suspect, is the theatre against which we're doing it, because COVID has disrupted the way all of us do business all of the time. And so I think as we look to DSEI, I think the scope and the reach and the ambition will be as grand as it ever has been. The way we deliver it will be tempered in two ways. One, we'll have to be very careful how we manage footfall around the place. There's a physical element to that, and making sure that we understand how that flows and runs through this, so that those that are able to attend and want to attend can do so and get the most out of it. And we all want that. So I think that, if you like, is one critical piece, is making sure the feng shui that sits around the orchestration of it works. And I think there's also an element of also understanding how some of the virtual elements will start to play into what was traditionally always a very physical, very tangible show. Inevitably, as we have to disperse more, as we have to increase access points for those that can't get in, there'll be a growing virtual element to this that we'll have to understand how to work with. And against the whole backdrop of that, I think there's a growing appetite to understand and play through the dialogues that are so important in this space, both off the back of the show itself and the supporting visits that go around it. So what changes from last year? Everything and nothing, I guess, is my answer. Yeah. It will remain an extremely rich experience for all those that come, where we get the sort of conversations and insights into the way things are going that we're all seeking. But inevitably, the theatre and the backdrop against which it's played out will have to be on an evolving basis as we come to terms with the impact of the pandemic.
So, Mark, I think I totally agree with you. And it's really interesting being on the planning side for DSEI as well, and dealing quite closely with Clarion, how they're learning the lessons brought by the pandemic in terms of harnessing the virtual world. But nevertheless, they're acutely aware, quite rightly, that everyone needs to meet face to face. There is an erosion in other areas the longer you go on in this virtual working environment. And we're definitely planning for a full-on DSEI real experience. However, harnessing those areas of the virtual that are deemed necessary for people that might not be able to make it still from other places in the globe. And then in terms of the exhibition itself, making sure that, for example, the keynotes can be accessible for many, many people, not just those that ordinarily would have been bunched up in a conference centre, by exploring what we can offer as an audio-visual experience. So I think it's going to be much better, and as you say, a richer experience of living and learning from the lessons we've had. Do you, in terms of what I've been quite heartened by, because I'm relatively new to the company, is the reach into many arms, the Ministry of Defence and yourself. Already we've had one meeting with you to make sure that we can collaborate, and we're pitching together. Do you think at the top level across government, we can expect to see sort of a greater support from the ministers and officials outside what we traditionally have, because of this backdrop of where we sit in terms of post-pandemic, hopefully by that stage largely, but also from the post-Brexit era?
Yes, I mean, the short answer is yes, and let me just expand on why I think that's the case. I mean, we've long collaborated closely with industry as an organisation ourselves, and one of the reasons why we sit inside the Department of International Trade rather than any of the other ministries is because our job is to partner with industry and work alongside and with all elements of the industry, not just the material elements, but the softer side, the services side as well. So that partnership, I think, is deep, it's well founded, and it will continue to go from strength to strength. And it lies at the heart of the plans that we've been rolling out in conjunction with colleagues across government and other ministries, and with our partners across industry, as we face this increasingly competitive world where we can see the budgets contracting. We know the trade space is going to get more competitive, the competition will come more intense, and we need to make sure that we stand together ready to compete in that environment. And I think you'll find that across government there's a growing appetite to engage across the piece in as collaborative way as possible. We've certainly seen a huge upsurge in the quality and the depth of the engagement that we're getting from all the people we're seeking out across government, and we're seeing that across the industrial space as well. This isn't something that's sector specific, it's something that I think we're all reacting to in the face of the pandemic. And the benefit for all of us is that greater degree of collegiality, that greater trust, the greater partnership that develops out of that means that what we're starting to be able to offer to our partner countries is something that's both deep, strategic, and really profoundly meaningful in the current circumstances, because it is so joined up. So one of the I guess silver linings of the whole crisis is that it has got us all operating very much as a team in a very deep way, and it's now intuitive for everybody across the different departments involved, across the different companies involved, across the different sectors that touch this space, to make sure that we do operate against the backdrop as one. And that, I think, can only enhance the quality of the offer that we lay out there for our partners and friends internationally.
So, Mike, I mean, you're dead right there. And back to your experience when you were looking after the UORs for counter-IED, for every threat, there's always the opportunity, and it encourages an era of collaboration. You look at the response across UK industry in the pandemic. Take I think it was the Mercedes Formula One team working on ventilator machines, and nobody's really hiding behind their own IP. Everyone's wanting to collaborate and bring it forward. And again, my hope, I think, like your hope, and I'd be interested to get your views on this, is when we're back into this normal jogging after pandemic, is making sure that areas of SMEs and the supply chain don't start hiding behind their IP and actually continue to collaborate, because we are definitely stronger together.
No, I agree, and I think what you'll find is that I don't think we'll ever see a return to any form of normal. We'll carry on a journey into some sort of refined future, and as that future becomes clear, what we're setting up and what we've put in train, supported by ministers from the Home Office, the Ministry of Defence, and the Department for International Trade, is a set of measures gathered under what we termed the Export Academy, to enable SMEs to engage much more fully, much deeper and in a much more sustained way with the export markets that matter for their business. And I think that development across the piece will start to allow us to provide, again, a deeper teaming service than perhaps historically has been the case, because there's now a genuine appetite from all corners of government and industry to understand how we develop the skills, develop the experience, help with the market entry, market access issues that sit out there, and ensure that what it is that we're putting out into our friends and partners internationally is clearly understood and seen for what it is, which on more than just on a coincidental basis is generally speaking at the leading edge of technological development, is at the leading edge of IP development, and therefore presents a really exciting set of capabilities, options, developments across the board for people to engage with. And that, I think, if we can harness that as part of this process, we'll see ourselves through the next 12 to 18 months through the impact of the pandemic and into a future where we genuinely have a set of options on a sustained basis that we can follow through. And that export academy, I think, is going to be fundamental to making sure that our SMEs across the board are getting the support that they need to be effective out there in the international marketplace.
Yeah, Mark, I'd agree. And I think, increasingly I've seen the UK approach to innovation grow in orders of magnitude as we're sort of harnessing some of the smaller companies and giving them their even voice in the marketplace, which is really, really important. And of course, the theme for DSEI next year is this of the multi-domain integration. So no longer the traditional domains of air, land and sea, but also bringing in cyber, bringing in space, which is actually where some of these newer companies and faster and more agile and innovative companies are bringing them out to the bear much quickly and then integrating it in a larger sphere. You talked about standing on the world stage sort of quite proudly because of the skills we've got. One of the areas that's always traditionally been hard to break into for an awful lot of SMEs within the UK is the American market and getting exports across to the US. I'd be interested to take your views on how we could increase the sort of a joined up approach in terms of using the embassy and maybe ADS and supporting the SMEs at sort of major US exhibitions.
Well, I mean, I'm very bullish about our ability to operate in any market. And when we look at the US market, we see a market which actually technologically is attractive to us to work in, to invest in, to trade with. It's got a governance that's easy for us to operate within and without. And the real effort here is this joining up across the piece. And we work incredibly closely with the embassy. We've got colleagues there who work with us full time on ensuring that what we're offering into the US economy has the best possible market access opportunity. And we work very closely with our colleagues in the Ministry of Defence to make sure that across the spectrum of cooperation with the United States, we deal as productively as we can in all areas. Of course, all of this is taking place against the backdrop of the current negotiations with the United States, so it'd be wrong of me to go into any real detail there, and I hope you'll forgive my reticence in that space. But the bottom line is we've got an extremely close ally who we share the highest levels of cooperation with, so continuing to be able to work effectively with them, alongside them, trading with them, sharing our IP, developing our business models together is something that's entirely appropriate and lies front and center of all of the things that we've set ourselves out to try and achieve. And I think when you look at what we're doing for our access to those trade shows, the support we give to SMEs, you'll continue to see the Department for International Trade step forward. The Trade Access Programme will continue to evolve and develop to make sure that we've got the right level of support for smaller companies to be able to access into the US market. And our own trade show representation programme has been given a real fillip this year with our rebranding, with the new investment into how we're going to operate as a team across the UK front, so that again smaller companies are able to fall within the fold and be supported by us just as effectively as larger companies. So I think across the piece, you're going to see a real energy being driven into how we work this. The nuances around the DSEI program we talked about for next September are going to be no different in any of those US shows, and we're going to have to stay with that, track it, and make sure that we're in a position to intervene with it across the piece. And so we've got an exciting set of initiatives being developed inside the organisation to make sure that the trade program that we roll out over the next 2 years is both maximizes the opportunity for market access, maximizes the opportunity for face-to-face contact where we can make it happen, but most importantly of all, sustains our relationships and sustains those global supply chains that matter so much to the SME community in the face of the pressure that the pandemic in particular is going to put on them.
Yeah, Mark, absolutely. As we go from strength to strength, I mean, we know the importance of defence and security exports in terms of the overall UK prosperity drive, and we know how crucial that is. As we go from this success to success, there is a risk as we continue to export and grow in stature globally that we almost become an attractive target in ourselves and more vulnerable for sort of hostile state actors, primarily in sort of cyber, but other sort of below threshold activities. And only yesterday, I think it was, the National Cyber Security Centre published their stats, and we're up 20% on serious incidents for last year. So I guess that your views on this will be interesting in terms of making sure that we continue to harden ourselves in the home base. If at all, we are going to be more attracted as a target for non-state actors or hostile state actors, or actually if that is going on anyway and it's just prudent housekeeping.
I mean, to some extent, I would reply to that by saying it's prudent housekeeping. I mean, we all know what the threats are out there. They're prevalent, they're constant. We see, and you see it reported in the media the whole time, this sort of relentless wave of attempts to breach, in particular in the cyberspace, the various layers of security that sit there. And of course, these attempts to breach it affect every element of the country, every element of the economy. So we're not alone in terms of the way this threat works, the way it seeps through the system, and the need to remain vigilant against it. So we're conscious of that. But we're also very conscious of the capability that we've got here in the UK, which is universally acknowledged as being globally leading. We've got some of the most innovative and effective cyber companies on the planet, and they have a critical role to play both domestically with us and with our partners overseas. And anything that we can do to enable and ease those relationships, we stand ready to do. There's an array of government organisations involved in that process, and we're one of the cogs in that process. But we all recognise the reality of that threat and the importance of having a joined up response to it that's technically agile and able to keep, if you like, ahead of the problem. So yeah, is it background noise or something special? Who knows? But it is there. We're very conscious of it, but we're also very conscious that we have a large number of operators in this country who are very skilled in that space, and those skills are in demand globally.
Mark, thank you so much. Unfortunately, sort of is time going to preclude us going much further in the discussion. I know we could continue the discussion for at least another 30 minutes. It has been really fascinating this afternoon, and thank you very much for giving up your time. When I look back and I hear in myself what you've just said and play it back, I hear innovation, I hear inspiration, and I hear integration, all in an era where there's a lot of opportunity out there. As we've learned a lot over the last 12 months through COVID, we are very much looking forward to returning onto the live stage as opposed to the virtual stage. I know it's been business as usual for you in a lot of characteristics in terms of defence security exports anyway in the organisation. But increasingly going into next year, I think we're well placed. I think UK industry is well placed. And it's been really heartening to hear everything you've said this afternoon. So, Mark, thank you so much for giving up your time. It really is much appreciated.
No, well, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to air a few views. And can I just reassure you and anybody that ever chooses to listen to this that we remain an integral part of the operation internationally of making sure that we and our friends and partners overseas stay secure. And we're looking forward to an ever more proactive future next year as we work through the disruption, as you say, and we take full advantage of the opportunities that are presented to us and to our colleagues across government and industry to make sure that the best of British lands overseas.
Brilliant. Mark, thank you very much. And to all of the listeners or people that have been watching, thank you very much for sparing your time to spend a little bit of time with this afternoon with myself and Mark Goldsack. If you do want to know any more about future DSEI events, then please do go onto the DSEI website and go on through to the press office where they'll let you know about upcoming engagements. But to Mark, thank you. And to all the viewers, thanks very much. Goodbye.